Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Monday, April 21st. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you. On this episode, we have a new fastest player in the big leagues. Chandler Simpson got the call over the weekend. We'll talk about expectations for him as part of the always complicated Rays roster. Get some injury updates from the weekend, several mailbag questions as well. We'll dig into where the money went from a fantasy perspective and try to decide if there's any goodness in some of the players that were dropped over the weekend too. Always a good exercise. The further into the season we go, the more interesting some of those healthy players that are dropped become. I got to ask before we dig into this rundown, did you return to the Fight Club this past weekend?
In a way. So our Easter celebration that we do in our household, especially with the kids getting a little bit older, there's no more Easter egg hunts. There's no painting of the eggs. Instead, what we have something along the lines of Egg-Amageddon. And what we do is we buy these paper eggs that are filled with confetti. Have you ever seen these?
No. Go on. I'm intrigued.
And we smash them on each other. We just absolutely go to town. We're throwing these things. My son, the pitcher, is pegging my legs. You just making a fabulous amount of mess in seconds. It's like it's a crazy flurry, and then of course it's like much more cleaning up than actual fun time. But there's some name for it, like cascarones or something. It's like these. It's like I think it might be like a Mexican Easter thing, but it's from my wife's family side, and we go to town on each other. So it was a fight club of sorts.
Oh yeah, I mean that sounds like a more family-friendly version of the Fight Club, but a good Fight Club nonetheless. And I think most of the pagan celebrations around Easter are hilarious because they're so random. The obsession with the eggs, and bunnies, it's amazing. Every year, each and every year. And Big Egg still getting theirs because my son's at that age where, that's the kind of stuff we will be doing for the foreseeable future. So there's always
that's right. You can't do eggs, but you did the plastic eggs. And you looked for the plastic eggs. Do you find them all, or you think there's some still out there that you need to find in a couple weeks?
There may be some. We were over at some family's house, so maybe there could be some eggs that are just sitting out there. Maybe they'll find them on Christmas when we go back. You never know. Hey, what's in here?
You're looking for your beers.
$5. Yeah. We didn't do the beer one this year. That was a few years ago. My parents did that for us grown-up kids before any of us had kids of our own. That was how we celebrated there. And it's like this.
You don't want the kids finding beers.
No. We decided to cut that off once little kids started coming back into the fold. We hope everybody had a good weekend, though, if you had some time to spend with family or friends. A quick promo note, too. We are into NFL Draft Week, so be sure to check out all the great stuff we're doing this week. Diana Rossini is going to share all the info she's hearing the day before the draft on Scoop City's YouTube channel. That's going to be a 4:00 Eastern live stream on Wednesday, April 23rd. Then on Thursday, the Athletic Football Show kicks off a 2-night live event. On night one, Robert Mays, Derek Clase, and Dane Brugler and Bruce Feldman break down all 32 first-round picks in real time. On night two, Robert, Derek, and Dane return to cover all the picks from rounds 2 and 3. Highly recommend that live stream. Check that out. It's the Athletic Football Show's 2025 live NFL draft special on their YouTube page, beginning at 7:30 Eastern on Thursday and 6:30 Eastern on Friday. All right, on to the baseball news you should know. Chandler Simpson has been promoted by the Rays, and not surprisingly, he was among the most actively added players in fantasy leagues over the weekend. We'll talk more about some of the details later on in the show. As Simpson goes, though, didn't take long for him to use that blazing speed. Very interesting sequence, actually, from the official score. Switching was initially ruled an error on Paul Goldschmidt to a hit for Simpson, which kind of took away a Max Fried no-hitter. He gave up another hit before his outing ended. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it mattered that much. And as upset as Michael Kay was on the Yankees broadcast, Aaron Boone after the game said, yeah, that was a hit. So I don't think there's much to see here other than blazing.
Deflating. Speed. It's also deflating in terms of like how no hitters, like they were, we're announcing a potential no hitter, Max Fried, and then, he lost the no hitter a couple innings ago. It's just, I was watching it. It was weird, but I get why they might be mad, but I doubt Fried was all that mad. He ended up giving up another hit anyway later.
Yeah, ended up being fine. Now, the big questions about Chandler Simpson are pretty fun. First and foremost, how much is he going to play? Thinking about the way the Rays depth chart is built, right? I mean, the corresponding move for the promotion for Chandler Simpson was that Richie Palacios went back on the IL with a knee sprain, comes back from a finger injury, plays one game, ends up with a sprained knee. So Palacios goes back on the IL. The move that they used to get Palacios off the IL was Coco Montes going down. So all they had to do was create a 60 or a 40-man roster spot by putting Alex Fido on the 60-day IL to get Simpson on the roster. They let him off against the righty on Saturday, dropped him to 9th on Sunday against Fried for the lefty-lefty matchup, but he started both games in center field. And as we talked about the different options they've had, they've used Jake Mangum, they've used Cameron Meisner. Chandler Simpson has blazing top-end speed and could be an everyday center fielder. And the usage this weekend, if he holds his own as a hitter, is probably a pretty good indication of what they would like to do even after Josh Lowe gets back. I think Josh Lowe fits much better in a corner. So if you have to kind of put the pieces together on the depth chart, you say for now, Meisner platoons in left field with Christopher Morel. So this definitely hurts Morel's path to an everyday role. And once Josh Lowe comes back, that might push both of those guys in the platoon into smaller roles. Someone probably goes back down to AAA once that happens. So I think you can see the path to everyday plate appearances as long as Chandler Simpson hits. He's a fascinating player because by low strikeout rates in the minors, the scouting grade on his hit tool, it's basically if you took Jacob Wilson, the A's shortstop that we talked about last week on our segment with Trevor, how I'd pitch this guy, and you give him 80 grade speed, made him a center fielder, that's Chandler Simpson. That's the player he's been so far in his professional career, which is pretty enticing when you're talking about someone that could maybe in a full season steal 80, 90, or even 100 bases.
Yeah, but you always have the risk that they just do not have enough bat. You know, like the hit tool is fine, the swing strike rate is fine, the K rates are fine. The hard hit rate in AAA was 16%. We don't have hitters in the big leagues that have a 16% hard hit rate. The lowest that we have right now is Bryson Stott with 20%. And I think my comp for Chandler Simpson is actually Xavier Edwards. Xavier Edwards has a larger strikeout rate than you might expect from the comp. But in terms of hard hit rate, 23% last year, 1 homer and 330 plate appearances last year, 0 this year. That's probably good news if you're Chandler Simpson, though, because even with these poor hard hit rates, this little power that Xavier Edwards has, he's carved out a role that's based on being good defensively, putting the ball in play and running like hell on the base pass. And if there's room for Xavier Edwards in this world, then there is room for Chandler Simpson. You'll see that the other low hard hit rates are all sort of batting average people. It's Luis Arias, Stephen Kwan, Bryson Stott. Those are the players that are at the bottom. There are also players that you worry about, you know, their place in the league down there. Heimer Candelario is down there. Max Muncy from the Athletics is down there. You know, they may or may not make it as hitters. So I this is not my type of player. But people have needs. People have stolen base needs. And I think that Chandler Simpson is going to play, because even if you are a projectionista, as I am, Christopher Morel, best projection at outfield. And right now, even with some of the struggles making contact, he is an above average hitter. Josh Lowe, second best projection in that outfield. And then you have a trio, Richie Palacios, Johnny DeLuca, and Chandler Simpson, that are all actually projected for about the same production on at the plate. And then you say, well, Chandler Simpson has the best glove of the group, so he's in. So now you have an outfield that most days looks like Simpson, Lowe, and Morel, and the backups are DeLuca and one more. So maybe Magnum and Miser are down back in the minor leagues when everyone's healthy, and it's DeLuca and Palacios on the bench. Or, it's any combination of those two. But you can really see that given his projections are so close to the same as Palacios and DeLuca, why not just give it to Simpson?
Right. And consider that, as he continues to improve in center field, he has the raw ability to become a well above average defender over time. I don't think he's there yet. I think we'll probably see some instances where maybe his speed can bail him out as he gets more comfortable out there. But generally, I think that's the most valuable version of Chandler Simpson is one that the Rays play every day in center field, turn into an above average defender, and use him to just put a ton of pressure on opposing defenses. Like, that is well within the range of outcomes. Xavier Edwards was a pick 150 guy in most drafts this year. And I would say Edwards probably has a lower stolen base ceiling than Simpson, and Edwards has plenty of stolen base ceiling. So I do think as far as like your roto comps, that's better. I know when we first talked about Chandler Simpson a few weeks ago, we said Billy Hamilton might be the roto comp. I think Chandler Simpson makes more contact than Billy Hamilton, and still, even with that low hard hit rate, probably hits the ball harder than Billy Hamilton too. Like, Billy Hamilton had absolute, like, borderline zero pop. I think Chandler Simpson has just a little bit, and that might be enough too.
Hamilton, for most of his career, had 100 to 103 max EVs. And Chandler Simpson already has a 104.6 and a 102.5 in the major leagues. So I think you're right on that count.
Yeah. So that's a pretty interesting space to live between. Like, it's Xavier Edwards in terms of average, but maybe Billy Hamilton bags if everything comes together. And it's a first-time big league player. Maybe they'll fill up the zone against them and say, come beat us. The stuff you've seen so far is not as good.
I did not spend to get him this weekend. And I think the anti-case for Chandler Simpson is just if the glove is not the best of the trio of Richie Palacios, Johnny DeLuca, and him that are similar in projections, if his glove is not the best of those three, then there is not a real great case to keeping him up in the major leagues, because then he won't be playing every day. And then you'd rather he probably be playing every day in AAA. And so that is an outcome that I assign some likely 30% possibility. There's got to be like at least a 30% possibility he's not the best glove. Johnny DeLuca comes up. Johnny DeLuca is a center fielder. Chandler Simpson goes down.
That's definitely in the range of outcomes. I think the window, if I had to guess, like what I think it looks like in terms of how long will they try this, probably until Josh Lowe comes off the IL. If things are not going well at that point, and that's going to be probably the second or third week of May, based on where he's at right now, Ryan Bass from the FanDuel Sports Network that covers the Rays has him at least 2 weeks away from even starting a rehab assignment, and it's been a lengthy absence, so it's probably not going to be less than a full week, maybe even a little longer, before Lowe has his timing back. So you put that timetable together, that gives you an idea of like how long this experiment or this first look might actually be for Simpson.
Johnny DeLuca had a 2 to 4 week timeline at the beginning of this month. We've not gotten an update, so I'm going to assume it's more on the 4 week side. And I'm reminded, I think it's Jason Collette says, add 2 weeks. So if you give him 6 weeks from that original timeline, then Johnny DeLuca is due back maybe a week after Josh Lowe. So that's Chandler Simpson's runway right now is the next 3 weeks, basically.
My general argument, I'm a little more optimistic than you are that it will work. I have questions about how quickly he'll adjust to big league pitching, because I have questions about everybody trying to make that adjustment. Mm-hmm. But I think the argument I would make for Simpson in the non-fab universe especially is you want to see what happens here. Like the range of outcomes is wide enough and they span high enough, or even in a 12-team league, this is worth the pickup in most cases. If you're stacked on your bench and you just don't have a need, I understand passing in those instances. But generally, like Chandler Simpson falls into this is what a bench spot is for. There's enough potential where you do want to take that look in shallow first come, first serve leagues.
I just wasn't willing in the 15-team leagues to it was like 150, 200. I think the max across all leagues was like 600.
Oh, and there were some big bids on Chandler Simpson because in the top percentile, it hits right away, rookie of the year candidate dream scenario. He's a huge difference maker in two categories, maybe three. Mm-hmm. And he ends up being in your lineup just about every week the rest of the year. So I understand why some people did it. I didn't feel like the situation is perfect as far as him getting all that playing time that we need for it to pay off. So I didn't splash the big bids on Chandler Simpson either. And I say that as a relative optimist about how this might go. Some other injury news from the weekend. Scary scene to start off Sunday Night Baseball. I was on the road when this actually happened. Luis Arias was carted off the field in Houston. We'll watch the video if you're watching on YouTube. Tried to knock a bunt down the first base line, and Mauricio Dubon, in covering first, kind of went through with bad footwork is the way I would describe it, to receive a flip from Christian Walker, right? Valdez wasn't going to get there in time. So Dubon got there late, and his momentum carried him over first base right into the path of Arias, and Arias got the worst of that collision. I don't think it was a dirty play. I think it was just an accident. Like with if you choose to manage your feet differently, you're not going to go through at that angle. I mean, you think about the way pitchers cover first base on those flips all the time. They practice that a ton in PFPs. You kind of round off your run so you don't veer into where the runner is. For pitchers, their pitching arm would be exposed if they did that anyway. So you understand why they practice it and why they do it that way. But I just think this was one of those kind of weird things where, because he got there late and he was just trying to make the play, he ended up thinking entirely about getting his foot on the bag and catching the ball, and not about what was going to happen after he did that.
Yeah. I mean, let's watch it again real quick. I think the pitcher version of this is that he gets to the line and runs parallel to the line to the bag instead of right across the bag. Yeah. I mean, we had a play similar to this in Little League this year, and the person who got yelled at was the pitcher that was covering that went across the bag like that, but you can also see that in the moment you just want to get that out. And it's not like, we've been discussing this a lot on socials today, and it's not that I put a ton of blame on. I don't think it was dirty in any case. I just don't see that there's any way you can put any blame on Luis Arias, because you run through the bag. That's what you do, especially on a close play, whatever. It doesn't even matter. You run through the bag. Everybody knows you run through the bag, and there's no rule about the space after the bag belonging to the runner. There is no rule about that. I want to be clear about that. And you can see how he just wanted to get to the bag, so that makes sense. But the reason this doesn't happen more often is that because most people round out their run, understand that the runner is going to be running, has this lane, is going to be running through there, and so they either through practice or instinct round out the runs. I mean, it might be a little bit easier for a pitcher, right? Because they're running to some extent parallel to the runner at some point. So they're rounding it out
to round that out a little bit.
And Dubon was coming from second base, and it was kind of straight at the bag. What he should have done, quote unquote, is to kind of run to the line and then start running basically at the runner, which
is also kind of unusual too.
But he'd have to, you get to the line first, so your momentum is not going across the line anymore.
Right.
And then you sort of get the bag, you start running at the runner and get the ball, so that your momentum takes you past the runner. That's the route that I think was possible in that one. I don't know if that gets the out.
That's the thing. That was a close play where if he didn't go straight to the bag, Arias is probably safe, and everyone's saying, why didn't he get to the bag faster?
Yeah, right? Yeah.
So I mean, it's all that.
Tough to be in Dubon's shoes right now, and it really sucks because Arias was out. I mean, he was out on the field. He had a concussion, so I'm sure he'll go into concussion protocol, and I would assume he's out for a week or so. He gave the thumbs up on the way out. He walked into the clubhouse after the game. He will be fine physically. I don't think there was any mention of anything being broken. And you can see it's more just it's a head injury.
Right.
So I think he will be out for a week or so, at least, while they put him on you can't come out of the concussion protocol any faster than isn't there like a 7-day IL for the concussion? So
they can use that.
That's about the fastest I would assume he'd be back.
Yeah. So the good news was, as you said, he was back in the clubhouse at the end of the game. Each update was very positive, but knowing that he got back even before they left the ballpark that night, think that generally means things are going to be okay in the long run for Luis Arias. So other injury news from the weekend, Tyler Glasnow left his start early on Sunday. It was only due to lower leg cramps. He's expected to make his next start Sunday against the Pirates.
He says he's dealing with that. He said it's like it's happening and he doesn't know why. And he said he really focused on hydrating and it still happened. So, I mean, Tyler Glasnow will always amaze us with new ways to find ways to be hurt. I feel like,
and I'm here. I'm here for the ride every single time.
The cramping. The other thing that's interesting about Glasnow is just that the stuff is down, and you know, I guess it was a little bit. I guess it recovered a little bit in that last start because his velocity was not quite there, and even in his start yesterday it was 94.4. Stuff Plus says it was a better outing for him where he finally got. No, it doesn't. What? That is weird. There is a disconnect between his Stuff Plus in the widget and his Stuff Plus on his page. Gotta figure that one out. Love that. I would just say it's obvious that Tyler Glasnow's stuff is a little bit reduced this year.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes these next couple of outings and how effective he can be if that's where it stays going forward. We did get Wyatt Langford back from the IL this weekend, so some good news there. Unfortunately, Ezekiel Tovar and AJ Puck went on the IL, so that's usually how it goes. You get the Friday updates of some guys coming back, then you get the Friday pregame updates of some guys going on the IL, and then there was just a wild game between the Cubs and Diamondbacks on Friday. There was some weird stuff all weekend, actually. This was an insane weekend.
I mean, the wind was blowing out like incredibly. And this is actually part of the problem with trying to figure out what's going on at Steinbrenner Field is that, you know, there is that piece by Michael Rosen that says the Steinbrenner Field is the most wind-affected park, even more than Wrigley. And we saw what the wind can do in that game. I mean, it was homer after homer after homer. It was everything up in the air was a homer. And they released they DFA'd half of their bullpen at the end of the game. They demoted, you know, Mantiply, and like they did a full line change in the bullpen because it was just so devastating.
That game was 2-1 after 6.5 innings. The Cubs put up a 5 spot.
Fine. Yeah.
The Cubs had a 5 spot in the bottom of the 7th. The Diamondbacks came back with 10 in the 8th, and the Cubs came back with 6 in the bottom of the inning.
Yeah.
It's one of those games that I opened up Blue Sky, and I'm looking at these updates. I'm like, wait, what? They had a picture of the scoreboard at Wrigley, and I'm like, what the hit? Why are they taking a picture of it like that? It's just the hit. That's the runs and hits and errors, right? And I'm like, whoa, no, it's not. Wow, there was some damage done to the ratios in that game. But yeah, you're right. The Diamondbacks completely refreshed that bullpen. And then the other thing I saw from Sunday, Ellie De La Cruz made one of the best catches I've seen maybe ever. Diving catch on the infield.
God,
just absurd play. Homers in the 3rd inning of that game. And like that, I was like, oh, that's awesome. He's having a day. The Reds go on to drop 24 on the Orioles. Like, what on earth happened in that game?
Oh my God. Yeah, I was watching that one. I mean, it just got out of hands for Charlie Morton. And like, I think I don't know. People are getting hits off of Charlie Morton's curveball, which is not a good sign because it's his only pitch that's above average by Stuff Plus anymore. That's something we can see from watching. It's his last pitch. So if they're hitting that, then I don't know where he can go. So I love Charlie Morton to death, but at 41, I'm not telling people to pick him up. It was just, no. And then Cody Poteet came in. It was like his debut for the Orioles, and that didn't go well. And then it was time for the position players.
Yeah, we saw Jorge Mateo and Gary Sanchez in that game. They gave a combined 9 earned runs. So that's part of where the 24 came from. But, I mean, geez, it was 15 before they got to that point. That was one of the strangest games of the weekend. The thing I was watching around the holiday stuff on Sunday was the Brewers running all over Jeffrey Springs. They had 6 stolen bases in the 1st inning of that game. I thought that was going to be the most ridiculous thing of the day. No, I think the Reds actually won that hat with the 24 run performance.
What do you think you would do? So the Diamondbacks at least have AJ Puck and Justin Martinez when they're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were kind of cycling through the guys to try and get to the back end of the rotation. So they back into their bullpen. So they have a different problem, I think, than the Cubs, which is that the Cubs maybe don't have a great closer right now. Ryan Presley's stuff plus down to 91, and it's pretty obvious when you watch him that he's nibbling and, he's afraid to use anything but his curveball, and even his curveball's down. Nate Pearson always has the great stuff numbers, but again, poor ass results, tied to those stuff plus numbers. So it may just be really bad command that's holding him back. Brad Keller's been resurgent, and I like him, but I don't know if he's my closer. And then Porter Hodge, who is my closer of the future there, has just been struggling. Maybe just Porter Hodge needs a little time to figure it out and play to his 319 Sierra and his 372 projection, and he's the closer, but he wouldn't be a top end closer, and that's too bad because this is Cubs team's pretty, like, the offense is great right now. So if you, and I know you don't want to do this, but if you were running the Cubs, what would you do about that bullpen?
Hey, look, I'm loyal to an extent when it comes to my rooting interests, and just so it's out there, like, if I were asked to run the Cubs, like, I think I'd have to accept. So I'm just gonna say, I don't think that's gonna happen. But people, I don't have a park named after me that they can write on the sign for if I do it, like for council or whatever else they wrote on there. So I guess I got that going for me. But what I would do, I'd be trying to make moves now. We talked about them as Sandy Alcantara hopefuls with the Justin Steele injury. Get some relievers back in that trade too, right? The Marlins at least have some nice bullpen arms you could add to it. I thought Brad Keller looked nasty when I saw him last week for the first time as a Cub. I thought maybe he is a high leverage guy for them, even if we think Hodge turns it around and is fine. Presley's problems are well documented. I mean, he's getting hit in the zone more than ever, 94.1% zone contact rate. It's only a matter of time before the wheels really fall off on him, at least in his current form. So I think you have to start making moves sooner than you wanted to if you're in Jed Hoyer's shoes right now, because your team is definitely good enough to be a contender. You should be the favorites in the division. Your lineup is dangerous. Don't go through this again where your bullpen is the reason or a main reason why your season turns into a disappointment.
Yeah, and I think your deep leaguers out there, I think you should pick up Brad Keller.
I think he might be worth the stash. I think you're right.
We're talking about a guy now who has 2 breaking balls that are over 85 miles an hour. Although we're hearing now from within the game that 86 is the new magic number. Still 85.9 on the sweeper, 87 for his gyro slider. So he has 2 sliders over the magic number, and his 4-seam is now up to 96.9. And all of them have decent shapes, and just to have a 5-pitch closer, Mauricio Iglesias, a little bit, like, he doesn't have the 99s, like the very top closers, but maybe he could, surprise some people and just end up being the best reliever and therefore the closer at some point. So I don't know that he's like a 10 or 12 teamer yet, unless it's saves and holds, but, he might have some SP eligibility in some leagues, and might be time to pick him up in SP eligible holds leagues. I have one of those. I'm going to go pick him up if he's there.
A little bit of Sparpy goodness there for you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Give that a shot. Brian Bayo's back for the Red Sox on Tuesday. I think they're in action as we record here because it's Patriots Day. So that early start that sneaks up on you every single year, even though you know exactly when it's going to be. Yet again, probably locked some lineups on some folks out there. I missed 6 picks this morning because of it. So there's always a cost every time.
Yeah, I've been trying to do 6 picks the night before, and then maybe checking the next day to make sure that everyone's actually playing, because like picking a catcher the night before is not always easy. You kind of have to sometimes look at what their playing schedules and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, because catchers always just get a day off at some point. Yeah,
you're right.
And if you figured out how to pick relievers in pick 6, tell me, because I'm I think they'll win this game.
It's very hard. It is. I keep mostly stacking them with my starting pitcher. I'm like, okay, didn't work yesterday. That's usually one of my criteria. Did you throw yesterday? No, then you're probably up today.
Right. Oh, okay.
I mean,
thought you're saying my strategy didn't work yesterday, but I'm going to keep doing it.
No, that's. I just think the latter, like having the continuity, like saying, okay, I expect this starting pitcher to pitch well, and then get to the A bullpen, and then because in the A bullpen, he'll get work and preserve the win, and maybe
I do usually make sure they didn't pitch yesterday. The teams are trying to avoid back-to-backs, and if they've done 2 in a row, then they're back-to-backs are fully out.
Yeah, especially early in the year. Maybe you get a little bit of that later on. You get a couple of those more in preparation for the postseason or something, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of those in April. Let's get to a few mailbag questions here. First one's from N. Morris 98. With the emergence of so many first basemen early on in the season, what do you do if you drafted one of the struggling first basemen? Christian Walker, Vinny Pasquantino, Tristan Casas, and Cody Bellinger are a few guys with higher draft capital, have gotten off to slow starts. Would you drop any of them for the likes of Tyler Soderstrom, Ben Rice, Spencer Torkelson, or the Jonathan Arandas of the world? A lot of the names that we were talking about throughout last week. Is it actionable if you have some of those more established veterans that are underperforming in the early weeks?
This is why we have the auction calculator and projections, I think, because we have to rein ourselves in. Now, I do want to say that I am not such a projections lover that I will take a 10-cent advantage and say, oh, that guy's definitely better than this, And so the name that I'm circling here is Tyler Soderstrom, because his rest of season projections are already for the 15th best first baseman. And there are guys ahead of them that aren't going to be played at first base. You have Salvador Perez, always going to be played at catcher. Jake Berger is probably going to be played at third. Cody Bellinger can be played in the outfield. So you've got Tyler Soderstrom basically making his case as a top 12 first baseman. And the value that the calculator spits out, if you use the BAT X, is within $1 of Pasquantino and Cody Bellinger for being the best in this group. And so Walker still has the very best projection. And so I think you just got to stick with Walker. But if you're looking at Pasquantino and you're looking at his projections and what he's done so far, and you're looking at Soderstrom, you can say, well, the projections are so close, and Pasquantino, while he is making contact, it's a little bit less than he was before. He's hitting more fly balls, but his barrel rate hasn't increased. His max EV isn't where it was last year. Maybe he just isn't going to add that next level of power, and maybe he'll just end up being a 250, 18 guy this year, which Tyler Soderstrom will beat that, And I think that you use projections to group them, and then you can make decisions on your gut based on that. But if you just fall into love with Ben Rice and forget that Giancarlo Stanton still could come back, and that Ben Rice still could go into a funk, and that Ben Rice still has options, then you don't bake all that risk in the way that projections can do for you, and the projections say, well, no, Ben Rice is like a $3 player the rest of the season with all this stuff baked in. Soderstrom's an $11 player that they're, and Pasquantino is a $12 player. But if you're looking at 11 versus 12, hey, do you think the projections are that precise? No, I don't think the projections are that precise. They just do a better job of sort of summing up all the different risks and putting them together.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I just ran 12 teams on the auction calculator, the BAT X rest of the season, filtered down to first base, and I made sure it was 2 catchers, corner, middle, all the stuff that I have for most of my leagues. And there are 9 first basemen when I search that way that come up as double-digit values for the rest of the season. It's Vlad Jr., Harper, Alonso, Sal, if you count him as a first baseman, Matt Olson, Freddie Freeman, Yandy Diaz, always pops in projections, Christian Walker, and Josh
Walker's
Naylor.
Still there. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's that little cliff, and you get down to Berger, Goldschmidt, Pasquantino, and Bellinger. They're all between mid-7s and like $9. So
they're corner infielders
together
in this format. They're no longer first basemen, yeah.
Yeah, so Soderstrom's close enough to that where I can easily see Soderstrom as being an upgrade over anybody in that group. If you want to tell yourself that story, we talked about the reasons we liked Soderstrom going into the year. I think the reminder I'd have is that for players that get drafted after the top 150 or so, like round 10 or later in a 15-teamer, those guys compared to guys that go even after pick 250, that's a smaller gap than we perceive it to be on draft day. The player pool flattens out. And then once you start getting new data, you start to see that last year's breakout for Soderstrom looks very real in the early going. You could start to nudge up, round him up a little bit. So he's still, to me, the standout of that bunch. I think the other player that I mentioned that wasn't part of the question is Jake Berger. Like, I'm not sure what I make of Jake Berger. We've talked about him a handful of times in the show over the years. I think he was a great story, popping a couple of years ago for the White Sox, putting up some good power numbers last year after a slow start in Miami. And I thought, the Rangers are a pretty well-run team. Like, they have a reason for going to get him. Maybe there's a year or two of good production there before he kind of enters that traditional corner infielder with power and limited defensive value, getting non-tendered portion of his career. All of that stuff could still be true, but the gap between Berger and even Spencer Torkelson right now, to me, like, that's a would you rather. Like, that's a fair toss-up sort of question. If you've got Berger on your roster and Torkelson's on the wire, or you've got both and you got to decide which one to cut to go get something else, I think you can at least make a case that Berger is the better cut of the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the leap forward for Jake Berger was about what he was swinging at and when he was being aggressive and when he wasn't. One thing that was constant, even as Jake Berger cut his strikeout rate, was that his swing strike rate was high. And now he's got a strikeout rate that's more commensurate with that swing strike rate. And I also think that if you're having like a little mini breakout based on where you're swinging or strategy like that, I feel like the league can adjust back to you. Mm-hmm. Oh, he's no longer swinging here, we have to pitch here, that sort of thing. Or we have to fool him with this instead of that. The swing strike rate seems like an underlying indicator of strong signal that he does not make contact well. And so with a 30% strikeout rate this year, you might say, okay, that's his true talent. He's a 30% strikeout rate guy. And that changes your batting average projection. Now, the bad X and oopsie say, well, he still makes really hard contact, so we're going to give him better BABIPs. But, you could look at Steamer and say, this is the worst case scenario for Berger, 236 to 22 more homers. And I liked one thing that you said, you can kind of shop the projections a little bit and just look at the worst projections and the best projections and treat that as a range of outcomes, And if the worst projection for Berger is 230, 22, and you think that's the trajectory he's on, and the best projection for Rice is better than that, then maybe you make that move. Again, this is more of a 10 and 12 team situation where he's the worst person on your roster. You got him in the 8th or 9th round. You're debating him against a free agent. Don't think of it's a sunk cost. Don't think it too much about draft cost. Just think, what are the best case scenarios and the worst case scenarios for these two players? Do I need to hop onto the best case scenario for somebody that, ahead of the season we didn't have in the same grouping?
Yeah, it's tough to do, but I think that's where I'm at with that group, especially. And I think, shopping the different projections, like, as a range of outcomes, is probably the easiest way to help quantify a decision, know if it's close or not. If low projection for one guy and high projection for the other are similar, then you're not wrong for asking the question. If there's a gap there, then you're probably getting a pretty clear answer from the numbers, even as they'll start to move a bit in season. Thanks a lot for that question. And Morris, let's get to this one.
Breaking news. Breaking news. Guardians designate Tristan McKenzie for assignment.
It's not the way I thought that'd play out in the long run. I think this time last year, I liked him as still a possible contributor in the rotation. I thought part of the reasoning was most of the time we'd seen him healthy in the big leagues, he'd pitched really well. I mean, look at that 2022 season, a 2.96 ERA, a 0.95 whip. That's over 30 starts, 191 in the third innings. He just hasn't had good health in the years since. Didn't click with the move into the bullpen this year. Strikeout rate wasn't good. Walk rate went up. I have to imagine there will be teams interested in a minor trade or a waiver claim in McKenzie, but a lot of the struggle does seem to be tied up with injuries.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like the White Sox will claim him for sure.
Right. Yes, he'll start for the White Sox.
Yeah. I think the thing that's been difficult for me, and I did circle his name a little bit this year because of the out of options game that we've been playing, but again got burnt by the out of options game because the other thing that can happen is they can just TFA you. So I thought maybe going to the bullpen would work for him. The salient sort of struggle, I think that the problem for him has been not enough velo when he commands it, not enough command when he velos it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right now, his location plus, impossibly small sample, but it's an impossible number, 58. I've never seen a location plus that low. And it's the best velo of his career. And we've seen a little bit of this yo-yoing around. The first time he came up, he didn't quite have the velo. And then he got a little bit of a velo bump, and he had his best season in 2022, Tristan McKenzie did, when he had a 92.7. It was his best seasonal fastball velocity as a starter. And he had a 2.96 ERA, and had his one shining moment. But the next year he came back and the velo was gone and the location was gone, and he has not gotten it back. So I do think it has something to do with injury and maybe just trying to live too close to his maximum.
Pretty high arm angle guy too, 52 degrees back when it was all working in 2022. He's a little higher than that the last two seasons, down to like a 49 degree angle. I just wonder if there's going to be more of a full mechanical rebuild with Tristan McKenzie at his next major league stop. We'll see where it is. I'm sure we'll get some kind of update in the next 48
without the
hours
options.
so.
That is the part that makes it difficult. It has to be one of these teams that can make these adjustments in the big leagues, or maybe a phantom IL where you give him some time to figure it out.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Certainly could be interesting with the right sorts of adjustments, but you're right. The combination of top end velocity and command are just not present at the same time. That's been a huge part of the struggle for Tristan McKenzie. Got a question here from J Hamilton 7. Wanting to know what's behind, if anything, the slow starts for Devin Williams and Emmanuel Clase this year. I mean, it's been bumpy. Part of the wild series between the Yankees and Rays was Devin Williams not pitching well on Saturday. It's not the first time either. He's looked gettable in multiple outings, even in the opener against the Brewers. It had a lot of traffic, had a kind of a wobbly blown save or wobbly save in that debut. What do you think's going on here? I mean, I saw the velo was down for Devin Williams. That was the first thing I noticed just looking at him maybe a week or so ago, is that he was not sitting at the same velocity with the fastball that we're accustomed to. And that seems problematic because for a reliever, he lives kind of closer to that shelf anyway, right? Last year was averaging 94.7 on the four-seamer. He's down to 93.6. He's pushed the use of that changeup up to 57% again. He's done that before. We've seen him use it as much as 63.8% and get great results. But is it just losing that little tick of velo that's hurting Devin Williams, or is there more happening here?
Yeah, it's really, sometimes you see this massive change in Stuff Plus and you try to find the underlying problem, and you realize that Stuff Plus is just this amalgamation of a lot of different interactions, and it's really hard to just point at one thing. Because if you actually look at it, Stuff Plus says his fastball is about the same as it's ever been. It's the changeup that's really hurt. But the way the changeups work is that they interlock with the fastball. So what I would guess is this: Devin Williams' four-seam fastball is down a tick. His changeup is up a little bit. So the interaction between the two is down. You know what I mean? Like the difference in velo between the two is down. Because otherwise, in terms of shape, the changeup, not breaking as much vertically, but just by like a half inch. I can't imagine that. And a little bit more horizontal by an inch. I mean, that could be part of it. The shape's a little bit different, a little bit more sideways than before. But I think mostly it's the difference between the two means that the hitter can wait a little bit longer to make his decision because he's got a mile an hour less of four-seam fastball velocity to deal with. And then B, if he is fooled, the velo differential is closer, so he might still make contact. Maybe it's just to foul that changeup off, as opposed to swing through it. So it is a delicate balance. He still does come out as above average by Stuff Plus because the changeup is still good and he still does throw pretty hard. And I don't think he's as bad as he's been right now. Some of this has to do with command too, because he's got a 17% walk rate. So I think he'll right ship and be fine. But you can see that there are definitely warning signs. And the other problem is that Luke Weaver is pretty good. And I feel like Luke Weaver has to be a must-own right now, at least in deeper leagues.
Weaver got scooped up in a lot of leagues. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes and where the money went. I mean, Williams had reeled off a stretch of 4 scoreless outings prior to the bump in the road Saturday against the Rays. So it kind of looked like he was settling in after a bumpy start. Some of this could just be small sample theater. It doesn't take much for a reliever to look a little bit off, but yeah, it's not quite the top shelf stuff we're accustomed to from Devin Williams so far. And at least the door, it's more open than I thought it would be in April for Weaver to get some saves or possibly take the job away at some point. All it takes is a 3 or 4 week stretch where Devin Williams starts to look more like himself, and that conversation ends really quickly. I'd say the same is probably true about Emmanuel Clase.
Well, there's actually no difference in stuff, though. I mean, there is something to point out with Williams. With Clase, there's nothing really.
The velo's down a little bit, but it's like still at ridiculous levels. He went from 99.5 on the cutter to 98.9. Okay, that shouldn't really cause you to fall apart.
Yeah,
91 on the slider last year to 89.5. Again, it's still an 89.5 slider.
And his swing strike rate is fine. You know, like his Stuff Plus is fine. What I see is a 487 BABIP. And I think that, yes, he allows more contact than your typical closer. And so this can happen, but it's not something that's going to happen all year. 487 BABIP's not going to happen all year. So I think he'll be fine. Now, I think the biggest risk with Clase actually is that Cade Smith is so good that they could trade him. So I could see Clase being traded at the deadline, but that's something to worry about later on. So I think Clase keeps his job and he's fine.
The other thing I would say is if a team trades for Emmanuel Clase, they're probably using him as their closer. So you're still getting saves. The other part of the question was when you have struggling elite relievers like this, do you just keep running them out there, leave them in the lineup week in and week out? You don't try to play the game of like, I'll give them a week off, make sure they throw up a couple zeros and then put them back in. Like, because you could do that and you could miss out on 2 or 3 saves pretty easily.
Yeah, the only people I do that with are these ones that we don't know they're the closer yet. You know, so I don't know what to do with Will Vest and Tony Santillan and Anthony Bender right now. You know, like those guys I might put on my bench just to be like, maybe next week I'll know they're the closer or not. You know, I don't want to risk them giving me a blow up and no saves. Like Williams could give you a blow up and then give you a save, you know. Yeah.
There's another question that came in with this one that I think is kind of interesting, and I agree with the general lean of it. It's basically asking for our thoughts on the strategy of going starter heavy with lineups early in the year and then adding save sources later on in the season. So if you got 9 pitching slots, you can use whatever you want. Maybe going 7 or 8 starters and only 1 or 2 relievers, and initially going like more aggressive with streaming, and then eventually as the league changes, you get a better read on committees, you start to push more relievers out later in the season, or maybe like around the trade deadline when some jobs change hands. That's when you scoop up some new closers and tilt the lineup to be more heavily relievers and make up some ground in the saves category later. I have no problem with that strategy because part of the appeal of it is that it's easier, generally speaking, to stream at the beginning of the season when hitters start off a little behind, less of a concern now than at the very, very beginning of the season, but also when the weather's cooler and the ball doesn't fly quite as much, right? The environment becomes more hitter friendly over the course of the season anyway, so you can get more innings in, ideally with lower ratios now, and then make that adjustment later.
I am 1000% in on the strategy, except there is a flaw in it that makes me wonder if it's a fatal flaw. And this is that flaw. You have less information about those streamers now than you do over the course of a year. And so you can put Chris Paddock in for a 2-step, thinking that's a good idea, and just get blown out of the water. Anybody here put Easton Lucas in for that 14-run two-step?
That was a rough one.
And we've tried to build tools that help us make decisions about pitchers faster, but starting pitching it's not just adding up the stuff plus numbers, and Easton Lucas looked like he had a league average fastball and a league average slider, slightly better than that, and an okay changeup. There are pitchers that have those exact, I could describe them that exact same way that are good. Like, isn't that Bubic to some extent, so I would say just be careful. I don't know. It is theoretically a good strategy. You just have to get it right.
Yeah. Well, any strategy can work with the right players, right? That's the old Gene McCaffrey
exactly.
line. That's true. Yes. If you have the right players, just about anything can work. Let's take a look at where the money went, though.
One thing you can do to kind of do this is in 15-team leagues or whatever, or just any league, just have most of your bench be starting pitching early on in the season. And what you can do then is you have more rosterable quality pitchers that you can choose from. And then you can be like, well, these are not streamers. These are rosterable quality pitchers, but I'm going to take this 2-starter over this 1-starter every time I can, because I'm not streaming. I'm using my own players. And then as people get hurt, replace them with relievers. That's sort of a safer version of this, because streaming can really knock your socks off some weeks.
And it can be expensive too, depending on how aggressive the rest of the league is. Let's get to where the money went here in this, we'll call it Chandler Simpson week. You mentioned some of the bids in the online championship, the 12-team leagues, the NFBC. The top bid was a $699 out of 1,000 for Chandler Simpson. As we said earlier, even if you like him, that is really, really aggressive. Min bid was 36. You're feeling pretty good if you got Chandler Simpson at 36, even in a league that size.
I put in some make good bids just in case I walked away with them. I had him around 50, I'll take him for $50,
Yeah, the other position player that was a big time ad, Caleb Durbin, who's basically going to get a run to be the regular third baseman for the Brewers. Oliver Dunn got sent down. Durbin's not your prototypical third baseman. I think the comp I made was younger John Birdie back when they made that trade. He's built a little different than Birdie and probably could get to a little more power, but we're still not talking about a difference maker in that category. We're just talking about someone that maybe does what a typical second baseman does, but does it with third base eligibility. I think that's sort of my mid-range expectation for Durbin as he gets this look in Milwaukee.
I actually put some decent numbers down, some 77s and stuff, because I thought, given the personnel that they have, maybe it gets solved by the trade deadline, an acquisition of some sort. But I don't really love the rest of the options at third base. They kind of went through Dunn. Vinny Capra's there. The corresponding move is always telling us something, and it's that they chose Durbin over the other third baseman. So I think he gets a shot at it. It'll be the lowest powered infield in the big leagues, I feel like. But be good defenders, all run well. This is a Milwaukee Brewer type of, what do you do with the spots you can't spend money on and you don't have great options? Get a great defender who runs well. Yeah, that's what they do. So
if you can't get power, that's the next thing you can do.
I thought Durbin was worth the money. Augustin Ramirez got called up and got some decent bids in some places, mostly in 2-catcher leagues. Again, it's a little bit like Durbin, where I don't love I think the player has some flaws, Augustin Ramirez, and I think he could be like a 230 hitter who ate 18 homers over the course of the season, like half the other catchers in the big leagues. But the other options in Miami have not been exciting for a long time. As much as Nick Fortes has interesting bat speed, he has not turned it into anything on the field. And so Ramirez could just take this job and run with it. And he has a little bit of speed. So I think he was probably worth, picking up in 2-catcher leagues.
Yeah, I saw a couple other position players frequently added. Connor Norby in 12-team leagues coming off the IL. That made a lot of sense. 127 was the max. Some people got him for $1, so not a bad pickup there. He should play a lot for that Marlins team. I think we talked about him as a sleeper that we liked a little bit at third base, someone you could get after pick 200 during draft season before that injury delayed his start to 2025. Luke Weaver, who we mentioned earlier, got picked up even in some 12-team leagues for as much as $201. Like, I get speculating in bullpens where the closer is wobbling, but that is more than you want to spend in that situation where you do not have the certainty of the role. Like, that is a big cash outlay to try and get some saves in a situation where, even though the door's open right now, it could be shut quickly if Devin Williams rounds into form. So I thought that was a little bit of a risky high-end sort of bid. How about Mickey Moniak getting added in some leagues? It's interesting because we talk about the Rockies often doing things that we wouldn't necessarily do ourselves if we were calling the shots. Moniak, in the small sample this year, is striking out less than ever. He is still chasing a lot, but he's chasing less than he did a year ago, down to a 40.7% K rate. Best hard hit rate of his career, 47.5%. That's with a barrel rate that's pretty much in line with what he did 2 years ago in 2023. So I'm curious if you looked at Mickey Moniak, at least in 15-team leagues, as somebody that you were interested in based on the usage in Colorado.
Yeah, I think he's a pretty awesome sixth outfielder that you have on your bench that you're going to use in half weeks. You know, in these weekly lineups, a lot of times you have the ability to play somebody for the weekend, you know, or for the beginning of the week. And so I feel like Moniak is somebody that we picked up just to be a streamer for 1 week in our main event. And I think we're going to hold him. We're going to hold him and use him half the time. And I think that'll be the best way to get something out of him because he's still got a 19% swing strike rate. So he's not going to strike out 20% of the time going forward. He's going to go back to whiffing, but his BABIP should be good in Colorado. And it may just suit him well to have a fastball approach. He may just be well suited to this sort of situation. And so, yeah, I tried to get Moniak. I debated Moniak against Alan Roden and ended up picking up Roden in some spots. It's a little bit risky because I guess Dalton Varsho is going out on rehabilitation right now. And we don't know exactly what will happen when Dalton Varsho comes back. But at the same time, I think Alan Roden has been taking really professional at-bats. And you look at the swinging strike rate, you look at the strikeout rate, he's put some balls in play, 32% hard hit. I think there's a chance he sticks because you could still have a Varsho, Santander, Springer, Roden grouping for the outfield. And even if you keep Straw around, I think you could still do that with DH. So I think Roden might stick. That was my little spiel for, acquiring Roden and 15-teamers. Otherwise, on my first place TGFBI team, I did splurge. I just thought this would be worth pointing out. I did not like Jonathan India going into the season. And part of it was you've heard it from me a lot of times before, which is I just have a bias against people who don't hit the ball that hard. He hits the ball okay hard, but it's worse now. And I don't see many indicators where I'm like, oh, I'm super excited about this, other than he's still, even as bad as has a 311 OBP, and he's still going to be in the lineup as much as they can get him because they need that OBP. And he's still walking and not striking out. And if the bat speed comes around a little bit, he'll be better. The other thing is, in a 15-team league, he's second base and third base eligible. He's like a really ideal bench piece, util, CI, MI, wherever, put him in somewhere. And he'll get you through some rough spots. So I spent $106 to get a player I didn't like.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. It's more like reevaluate and be like, there's always a price for a player, even if you don't like him. Like, you don't like him in the draft, don't just forget about him.
Right. Well,
You know?
you didn't like him at pick 200 or pick 225, but maybe if he was there 100 picks later, you would have drafted him as a bench player and you would have been holding him this whole time. And I do think I have a hard time putting a fab price on players that should be rostered. Not to say this describes Jonathan India, but sometimes we get questions in our Discord about players that I just wouldn't expect to see on the wire. And it's, well, how much should I bid on? I don't know, let's just say, even Joey Ortiz, right? Like,
he was out
Joey,
there.
you were asking me about that. And you're like, what do you think, man? Like, it's a tough call. Like, how much does everyone like him right now? The higher up you go in the rankings, when a player comes available that shouldn't be available, I think it's harder to decide what that number should be because you're kind of playing a game of chicken with the rest of the league. Where you all know the number should be bigger than what you're willing to spend. So how much can you shave off that number and still come away with the player that you want that makes you
I lost that game of chicken in my other league in Barf where I needed some upside and maybe I should have put more money on him. I put $56 on Joey Ortiz and I lost him 76 to 56, which hurt because then I put money on Caleb Durbin and lost him 68 to 55 or something. So I lost out on both the upside infielders that I wanted and ended up with Gabriel Arias 26 to 21, which is like, yay, you nailed the market price. You didn't go over by much, but you got the worst player. So it reminds me a little bit of what Friedman used to say, which is if you're sober on every free agent, you don't win any of them.
Yep. It's
so
an irrational market.
Yeah, you have to decide at some point. In this league where I really needed upside and I did a line change on this team that's in last place, I got Gabriel Arias for Brendan Rodgers, Luke Weaver for Justin Slayton, Mickey Moniak for Brian De La Cruz, Randy Vasquez for Landon Knack, and Alan Roden for Brandon Marsh. Given how many needs I had to get all that for less than $100, maybe that was the right way to do it. But that's how I play, is generally maybe a little bit too restrained.
Yeah, well, it's hard to say because a lot of times those best options in Fab still aren't that much better than the fallback ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's a gamble every week. It's because the playing time is usually flimsy or the skills are flawed, and we just don't know what circumstances are going to change quickly enough for a team to get on board and just let a player stick and let a player have that chance. Like Caleb Durbin's a great example of this. If Caleb Durbin just plays to his projection, that might be good enough for Durbin to just be a near everyday player for the rest of the season. And then he ends up being a pretty good Fab pickup. If Durbin goes into enough of a slump where they play the game again and bring Dunn back and go back to platooning, then it's just wasted money because you have a zero that you have to cut, right? And it's so hard to know because small sample size evaluations are as tough as anything we do in baseball.
Yeah. I mean, for Durbin, a 30% hard hit and a 105 max EV. There's probably a wide range of outcomes for that, including those that are not major league viable.
Right. But if he occasionally runs into a homer, gets on base at a 315, 320 clip, plays good defense, and runs as effectively as he has in the upper levels of the minors, great. That's going to work.
That's like a regular.
That. Yeah. So always fun trying to dig through the Fab. Let us know if you got questions for a future episode. You can join our Discord with the link in the show description. If I had to guess, it's going to be on Tuesday's rundown. Probably a little conversation about Andrew Abbott, who continues to befuddle us. We've dug into him before and came away with no real answers. Maybe we'll try again tomorrow since he was
I even
a popular
asked
pickup.
him, how do you do it? And he said, I don't know.
That's right. I don't know, man.
I don't either, man. His velo's down. It's down.
He's going into Colorado this week, and people were still picking him up anyway. And I'm like, you're picking him up for later, but you feel better about using him, even if it doesn't go well in Colorado.
And then he might just go out there and throw up zeros in Colorado and just be like, I don't know anything.
Right. And then on your bench, you'll be like, oh, well, of course I could start him in Colorado. think we'll dig into some of the early park factors as well. I think we got some numbers now on Steinbrenner Field and Sutter Health Park, so we'll get into those on Tuesday's show as well. But send us questions in the Discord. You can find us on Blue Sky. Eno is enosaris.bsky.social. I'm dvr.bsky.social. Thanks to our producer, the legendary B. Smith, putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Tuesday.
Thanks for listening.